Hi, Jamie. How are you?
I'm very good. Thank you, Caesar. How are you?
We are fine here. Thanks a lot for being here with us. I really, really appreciate your time being here. Thank you.
No problem at all. Oh, always a pleasure to talk to you, my friend.
Jamie, we are a big fan of MTA Learning and the work you do. We have met at ATD, one of the
Mhm.
largest learning and development conference in the world. I think it was back in 2016 in Orlando, right?
Yeah, yes, I think so. Yeah, it might even been at Universal Studios on the Harry Potter ride or
Yeah,
something.
yeah, that's
Uh,
it. That's it. Very nice.
yeah,
And
absolutely.
in that time, we have become a client of MTA. We have bought your kits, and we have
Yeah,
delivered a lot of experiential training here at Agora Inter Training. So, and we are a big fan. We really recommend your material and your methods. We are really big fan of you.
fantastic. Thank you. And I've seen some fantastic pictures of your work from Brazil as well, giant cranes and lots of excited groups. So,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, and I think you were probably one of the first people in Brazil to use our tools as well. So,
So
yeah,
nice.
it's great to have you on board.
We are pioneers in Brazil. Very good. Very
Yes.
good.
Yeah.
So, Jamie, we have a lot of HR and learning development professionals seeing us now. So, tell us a bit more about you, your career, and about the MTA learning, experiential learning business.
Yeah, sure. So I had a very kind of typical British career, graduated from a nice university, and then went to work in London for Deloitte. Um,
Nice.
but after 7 years of management consultancy, I think I decided I wanted to do something different apart from spreadsheets and number crunching. And um, so I got into MTA, and MTA is a really interesting business. It started in 1982, and it was actually started by my dad, a psychologist. And um, even though it was 1982, I did take some credit for starting the business. It was Christmas, and my dad saw me playing with a kind of a toy I'd got, and he saw me sharing and leading and trying to communicate and fighting and solving conflicts. And as a psychologist, these were all the kind of things he wanted to do at work. So he realized if he got people to play, he could help people become better leaders, better managers. People thought he was absolutely crazy, uh, but it was an approach that worked. It was an approach that excited people and engaged people.
It's a very nice story. So the MTA the MTA business has started with you as a kid.
Well, yeah, absolutely. I think my dad went through a very experiential process. He watched what I was doing and experienced watching me grow and learned from that, and was able to develop a business based on the back of that experience. So it's something
Fantastic.
I've grown up with.
Fantastic. So it's in your blood since you were a kid.
Yeah, I think so. I think so. And even actually, even the MTA methodology is so widespread in the UK. I used it twice at Deloitte before joining MTA as well. So it's something which has kind of
Nice.
touched on my career at multiple times.
Very nice. Very nice. Jamie, we heard a lot about experiential learning, and we have also been learning from the 70-20-10 models that talks about we learn best from experience. What exactly is the experiential learning approach? What is that, and what is this so powerful?
Yeah, sure. So in its broadest sense, experiential learning is simply doing something, reflecting on it, and learning from that approach, and then working out how that approach can help you going forward. So experiential learning can work in lots of different contexts, but for us at MTA, what we like to do is condense that experiential learning process into something which you can take into the classroom. And so for us, it's about providing very concentrated activities that give people an opportunity to practice all the skills and attitudes and behaviors that enable success in the workplace. they provide a very safe environment for them to reflect and discuss and crystallize their understanding of what happened, and then finally help them make sense of how they can take that learning back into the workplace. And that's something which, with the right tools and right methodology, is quite easy. And so I think that's what MTA has been able to do, is operationalize this concept which we all know about called experiential learning. But why is it so powerful? Well, because it's so practical. So common sense is not necessarily common practice, nor if I know something, that doesn't necessarily mean I can actually do it. But in experiential learning, you are learning and practicing the practical skills that are really going to drive workplace performance. So there is that direct link between what you're doing in an activity and what you are doing in the workplace. And of course, what is so often most difficult in the workplace is working in teams, is communicating, is leading and managing. And that's what experiential learning really focuses on and is really good at developing.
Very, very nice. Jamie, we are living this amazing fast world. So we are living the digital era, cognitive era. We are working from home. We are working 24/7. Although some studies have been showing that we work better when we are side by side. Yeah. And I would like to know, does this new digital world, does it impact the experiential learning in approach in any way, or does it becomes like more important than ever? How have you guys seen this transition to a digital era and the way we learn?
Yeah, well, I think it does impact experiential learning, and over the next few years, I think there'll be some really exciting developments in experiential learning in the virtual world. So being able to create virtual experiences that help people become more comfortable working in that environment. But for us, our approach is still very person-centric, is still very face-to-face. And to your point, I think it's actually more important than ever to help people develop the skills, enable them to work socially, because I'm concerned about how much time young people are spending on screens or on social media, or not engaging with the real world. But actually, it's the kind of projects we're giving people are more complex. They are demanding much greater social awareness and social skills. So being able to find a very quick and effective way to help people collaborate, lead, manage, resolve conflict is more important than ever. And that's what experiential learning is so good at. Now, there are challenges about implementing an experiential approach in the digital world. How do you get people together in the same place? There was a time when you could get people to leave the office for 2 weeks and go on a long development program. You can't do that anymore. So we need to find more condensed, quicker ways of doing it. How can you get people to leave their phones behind for half an hour? It sounds crazy, but it's a problem. So we're having to adapt and change, but it's important not to lose sight, I think, of the real value in getting people together and enabling them to collaborate. Successful businesses are built through people working together and sharing expertise and being bigger than their kind of individual contributions. And it's crucial we keep helping people learn how to do that effectively.
I totally agree. And Jamie, you probably in your projects you may have some high demanding competencies to develop through the experiential learning approach. We have seen that in this digital world. Most of the most needed competencies are more like soft skills rather than technical skills. So what have you been seeing? What are the most demanding competencies that you have been facing with your clients in this world?
Sure. So are they the competencies which people are asking for most, or the competencies which are hardest to develop?
Both.
Right. Sure. Okay. So I think the competencies which people ask for most is simply collaboration and teamworking. It's a bit of a cliche to say that people are a business's most important asset, but it is true. And to get the most out of those people, they have to be able to work in teams. But it's a very difficult thing to do, and it's not something we're taught at school and in education. But there's an awful lot of history and research behind developing teams. If you were to go onto Google Scholar, you'd see tens of thousands of articles. So it's a very well established field, and there's lots of activities you can do to support that. So I think that's the competency which is most in demand. But for me, one of the most challenging and crucial competencies to develop is actually facilitation skills. And so that is the ability to step away from a group and help a group maximize the efficiency of their processes. And it's a demanding skill because it requires lots and lots of different attitudes, skills, and behaviors. So the ability to question, the ability to summarize, good process knowledge. But it's also an area where there isn't as much research as team working or leadership. So it's something where when we're doing it, it feels very much like we're on the frontier. I don't think people necessarily value that competency enough in organizations, and certainly not enough in academia. And so you have this double problem of it's crucially important, maybe not recognized as important, and there hasn't been much research done on it as well, but really crucially successful going forward. And to your earlier point, as organizations become more fragmented and teams become more fragmented, the ability to bring those teams back together through facilitation skills will become even more and more important.
It is very hard to develop this, I know. But I think you do a great work at that.
I hope so.
Jamie, I know that you and MTA, you are an international company, so you're based in London, but you have clients all over the world. And from your experiences, would you say that the experiential learning is like a universal approach for everyone or every culture, or do you see any culture or national aspects of the countries that are like some barrier or some challenge for the experiential learning to work? How do you see that cultural environment for experiential learning?
Sure. So there are huge cultural barriers to implementing experiential learning. And I think they are not just national, but also corporate as well. So different countries have different cultures, but I often find corporate cultures are perhaps even stronger and more different than national cultures. And also the prevailing educational culture in a country has a big impact on the propensity of individuals to engage and understand the experiential approach and be ready to learn. So one of the lovely things about working in Brazil is that I found that people love the experiential approach. It fits very well with the perhaps prevailing Latino culture of being quite expressive and engaging and exciting and energetic, and perhaps less deferent to hierarchy, so everybody can get into a room and have a great chat, and it works really well. And there's not an awful lot of learning to learn we need to do before we implement this approach. But interestingly, if I fly 4 hours, 5 hours, 8 hours north from Brazil, I land in America. And in my experience working in America, we have a far more hierarchical culture. The culture is far more revenue driven. And so that impacts experiential learning in two ways. People say, well, how is this approach going to drive revenue? Now, experiential learning is a holistic approach. It's about developing people. And putting a revenue value onto developing a person holistically is very difficult. So it makes it quite difficult to justify the approach in very strict and simple terms. And if we have strong hierarchies, then giving control to a learner can feel very uncomfortable. So that's perhaps another barrier and something we need to do in terms of the organization. But then even then, that's too stereotypical, because in the US we have very different corporate cultures, and those cultures are probably even stronger than the prevailing national culture. So to your answer to your question, yes, there are big cultural barriers. I think they can all be overcome. I think the journey we take everybody on is exactly the same. So we take them from giving them an experience and making sense of that experience, then working together through it as a group is the same. But the way we have to do that is different. So closer to home, perhaps in Britain, we can be reticent to talk about our successes and what we're very good at. Whereas perhaps if we go to the Middle East, where I work, then it's a bit different. People are quite happy to talk about their successes, but critical feedback is more of a challenge to give in a group setting. So we have to do something a little bit different with groups in terms of them making them feel comfortable. So it's an approach that works everywhere, but we have to just be very mindful of our audience, the prevailing culture, and that changes a little bit how we go and implement the approach.
Very, very nice. And also, the last question here is not a question. It's like more like a tip for learning development professionals who are at this moment now trying to implement or develop experiential learning approach in their companies. And it's not like everywhere, but sometimes we still have this mindset that some C-level guys just look at the experiential learning like, oh my God, they're going to play to learn. Is this real? Does that work? So what kind of advice would you give to these learning and development professionals that are now trying to implement this approach and to their C-level guys who does like this?
Sure. So I think the first thing to do is really focus on the competencies you're trying to develop, because that's the kind of thing that C-level managers buy into. So we are going to develop better leaders. We're going to develop better team players. We're going to help people be more innovative and more creative. And how is that going to help the organization? So I think firstly, by being really clear about the competencies that you're going to develop and how that is going to help the organization is the first place to start. But then it's really selling the experiential approach. Now, the easiest way to sell it is to get the C-level executives involved with some really difficult, cognitively challenging activities that might perhaps get them to critique how they're performing, get them to break some habitual behaviors and help them really understand how it will help the organization. I think the second piece is as well to help C-level executives understand what really good performance looks like. And in my experience, we can get very focused, or organizations can get very focused on tasks. So that might be just simply developing a new product or processing or making cars. And that's fine. And that's what teams need to do a lot of the time. They need to be task focused. But there's also a lot of good research that says that even more effective teams stop, they reflect, they understand how they're performing as individuals and teams, and then they go back to work. And that's quite a compelling message for C-level executives, because it helps them understand why it is so important to go away, think about process, which is what experiential learning is so good at doing, and then sending people back to the workplace. And finally, there's this notion of playing that you mentioned. Now, for me, a very good experiential session might only be 20% doing some kind of activity. It's going to be 80% discussion, reflecting and generating ideas for improvement. But even that 20% of activity, if you were to use an MTA activity, you would find that you weren't really playing. You were thinking, you were problem solving, you were leading, you were managing conflict, you were disagreeing, you were being creative, you were innovating, you were asking questions. And that definitely isn't playing. But sadly, there is some experiential learning, which is playing. We're going raft building, we're going climbing, we're going cooking. And so it's important to help executives understand that really good experiential learning isn't playing. And what they might think is experiential learning might actually just be playing. And we probably shouldn't be doing that.
Very good, Jamie. I share your ideas here, and it's a very hard notion to implement. But as from my point of view, when you do a great work with experiential learning, they are more impactful and they last longer than the worst ones. So I think this is our challenge, and I think you are one of the leaders in the world of in doing this. We feel very very inspired by you here in Brazil, and very very thankful as well for having you here with us with this time. I know your agenda is full of commitment, so thank you very much for this chat. I really enjoyed it.
No problem. Thank you very much. Always great talking to you and having such an innovative partner in Brazil, Cesar. And looking forward to ATD in Denver next year.
Yeah, we'll be there. Thank
Fantastic.
you, Jamie. See you. Bye-bye.